Hello, this is Paul Gruhn, and I'm here with Rick Smith, a co-worker of mine at Yale University. And today, this is a continuation of the series of lectures we've been doing for the ICM590 project planning class at Quinnipiac University. Today we're going to talk with Rick Smith, a good friend and manager of the project management teams and stuff here at Yale. But first, I'll just have him introduce himself. Rick, tell us about your role at Yale and how long you've been into this project management business.
I'll be happy to do that, Paul. In my current position, I'm the Director of Metrics and Quality Assurance at Yale, and I report directly into the Office of the CIO. The primary responsibilities of the department are to ensure that we have adequate reporting and data and metric collection capability and functionality throughout our department in order to ensure that managers can provide world-class service to our faculty, students, alumni, and staff.
Great. And how long have you been in this project management business, and what types of things at a real high level have you been doing? I understand you're kind of certified a little bit. We're going to talk about that at another level, but give us a little bit of your bigger background.
Sure. Well, I came to Yale 6 years ago after working over 20 years in the private sector and Fortune 100 and 500 companies. My primary responsibilities there were program and service design, as well as business development. And I think in those roles, I had responsibility oftentimes for project management, business analysis, and process improvement initiatives.
Great. So you definitely come with a lot of real-life, real-world experience on the whole area of project management, and that's why you're here, why we're here
Sure.
right now doing this. When we were discussing, I think it was last week or the week before, about the project management class that I'm teaching and some stuff we're doing, we had a lot of different topics, but you brought up this whole idea of the three-legged stool, and you said, you know, they're missing a fourth leg, and that's kind of going to be the focus of today's interview. Is I'm curious about this fourth leg, but before we talk about this missing fourth leg that nobody talks about, let's talk about the first three legs. And what I'd like you to do, we're going to cut the tape in a quick second, but I'd like you to explain the three legs of project management from a traditional point of view, and what they are and how they fit in.
Okay.
Okay, I'll stop right there, I think. Okay, Rick, tell us about the traditional three-legged stool in project management.
Sure. I'm sure that most in your class have heard that the traditional three legs were scope, resource, and time, and that for a project to be successful, you have to have a balance between the three. In other words, if your scope is too great, you need to expand your resources, or you need to increase the time. So in order to have a project that's successful in terms of meeting your schedule, meeting your budget, and achieving all the things that the client has asked for, you had to ensure that you had a balance between those three. Again, scope, resources, and time.
So scope is typically how big the project is.
Correct.
And what they want to do. Time is how long you have to do it.
Correct.
And then resources, resources can fall into several categories. It's not only just about money, is it?
Absolutely. The resources can be equipment, it could be money, it could be staff, it could be a number of things that one would typically classify as a needed resource to accomplish a project.
Now, in other class lectures and other class times we've had, we've always talked about in terms of always these three legs, and that sometimes this thing called scope creep comes up, and so the customer wants more stuff.
Absolutely.
So now if that scope leg gets bigger, what happens to the other two legs?
Well, again, if scope expands, either your resources have to expand to keep with it, or the time in which you're going to deliver the project needs to expand
So
in
if
order
you,
to meet the scope.
so if you started off and you were building a ranch house, and then the next thing you found out the customer really wants a 3-level home, it's going to take a little longer to do it, and it's going to
Absolutely.
probably cost a little more money, and you're going to need a few more resources.
Correct.
Okay, now, so let's assume in a perfect world we had a perfect 3-legged stool. And this stool, the scope was clearly defined, and the resources we had, and the time, everything was just totally perfect from a project management point of view. And we're doing this work, and our stool's looking really, really good. And then you said, now there's a 4th missing leg. I thought I've got everything under control. What's this 4th leg you're talking about?
Well, you wouldn't be the only one that's surprised, but I think anyone that's worked in business for a while is going to become evidently clear what that 4th leg is, and that's the actual result. Oftentimes what we've found is that the project will come in on schedule, it's on budget, right? And we use the correct amount of resources that we had projected in doing it, but at the end of the day, we deliver the product and the customer is dissatisfied. And we say, well, I don't understand. I kept to the budget that you gave me. I did everything that you asked me to do, in the scope, and I did it within the time you asked me to do it. How could this not be a success? And the client basically responds back, well, it didn't deliver the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And the 4th leg that we found is that if at the end of the day the project does not deliver the expected benefit that the client had intended with that project and with that expenditure, they'll be dissatisfied.
So the end result of your project has to be a part of the true measure of the success.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what we find is some of the issues with that are in the analysis. I mean, there was an interesting statistic that I read probably 6-7 months ago. I think it was from Gartner that said 65% of projects fail. And this is across all industries across the United States.
That's over half.
Yes.
And so over half of projects fail.
Right. And that's billions and billions of dollars wasted because those projects, by definition of failure, either have to be redone or we have to come up with another project to meet the original need. Now, what's the reason for that is the obvious question. Well, the common reason seems to be it's in the requirements gathering in the business development. The problem was never clearly defined. And as a consequence, when we went into project management and we were trying to get our requirements, we were gathering requirements sometimes for a problem that the client had not clearly defined.
So an illy defined project, you may say, I think I want this.
Yes.
And this is what the project's going to do. And the project delivers it. Then you go back to the customer and you go, that's not what I wanted.
Exactly. It can be that, or it can also be that the project was intended that once it was fully put in place and automated, it would have reduced FTEs, or full-time employees, let's say by 10%.
Okay.
At the end of the project, we gave them the IT and the systems that they needed. But at the end, we found out that we could not eliminate those FTE, and thus couldn't reduce the budget.
So a lot of times, a lot of projects are put into place for businesses because they want to reduce workload. Maybe they have, FTEs you're talking about as a full-time equivalent. Maybe they have 10 employees.
Right.
It costs them $100,000 a year for each employee. There's $1 million.
Yes.
And if I could get rid of 2 of those staff, I could cut down my annual cost down to $800,000. And if I had a $100,000 project, that's probably a good investment because you'd save the company $100,000 a year.
Absolutely.
But then at the end of the day, maybe you didn't meet that goal.
Right.
And so then that leg ended up showing that 4th leg is broken.
Exactly. And that becomes the conundrum. And I think the focus of the new model is that many CIOs across, again, all industries are looking at the amount of expenditure in IT, and it's continuing to grow.
Mm-hmm.
While at the same time, they're having difficulty always measuring what was the true benefit in terms of, did this IT project that we put in really deliver on what I thought it was going to do in terms of the bottom line to the project.
So the actual real benefit's an important part of that measure.
Exactly. And in many or many IT departments, they would say, well, that's not my responsibility.
I did the project.
I
It
did
was
it.
successful.
It was on time, it was on budget, and it was within resources, so I'm done, project successful.
My 3 legs are working fine.
Exactly.
Great.
And the client unfortunately falls off the stool, as we showed in the beginning, because they said, no, this did not deliver the expected benefit.
So I was talking with somebody here at Yale a few years ago, and they talked about how all projects are successful and that companies spin them as successful. And this is a new analogy you and I have discussed, I'm kind of throwing this at you, is that a lot of times we're going to set a bar very high. And that, so here's our project bar, that we're going to accomplish this, 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 and this. And it may be on time, on budget, and here's our bar. But in reality, we ended up having to lower the bar. And we do it in such a way politically that
Yes.
we forget how high the bar was originally set.
Exactly.
And then we take that scope bar, forget about scope creeping and make it higher. We actually tend to lower the bar.
Yes.
And we basically, it's almost like we're building an artificial leg.
Exactly.
Any thoughts on that idea that we lower the bar or modify that final leg to make us look good, like the leg really was there?
No, I absolutely agree with you. And in fact, I know one of the things we talk about on our team is that it's the risk of unintended consequence. And what I mean by that is that when you get out of balance on the 3 legs and you have to adjust one, you put in action steps to try to level it out, to make the stool balance. But you don't always realize the unintended consequence of that. And that ties into your example. In order to finish my project and make it successful, and I've made adjustments to scope, I may bring it in on time. But now what's happened, because I've reduced the actual scope of the things that the client needed, I don't get the benefit.
Right.
So what they didn't factor into that adjustment is the unintended consequence. I took an action in order to be successful as I'm defining success in the old model, scope, resources, and time, lost track of what the consequence of that was going to do to the ultimate benefit to the client.
Right. So I had a project a few years ago, managed file transfer project, where we had 13 items on the list. And it was very, very clear and very, very important that all 3 legs were right, scope, time, and budget. In order to do that, we had to do this thing called a change order. So what happened was we actually took 2 of the very big parts of that project out of it. And so we made a change order and we lowered the expectation. We lowered the bar to what that 4th leg should look like.
Right.
And so we have to be careful and we have to communicate those changes carefully to our customer.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much once again for spending some time with us. I'm looking forward to our next video in a couple of days where we're going to talk about all that you have a merit, you're like an Eagle Scout for project management where you have all these merit badges of all your certifications. So I'm
Yes.
looking forward to telling our students of the different project management certifications that are out there and which ones are good for which reasons. So looking forward to that. But before we close it off, is there anything that you'd like to say in kind of closing to our students out there? Quinnipiac.
I would just close with, in my experience, one of the most important acronym, or actually business axiom that I found, is that a problem well defined is half resolved.
Problem well defined is half resolved. Excellent, and it's definitely falls into the whole 4-legged stool axiom right off the bat. Is that project? Matter of fact, we actually talked about project definition probably the first week or 2 of class. I hope we didn't forget what we learned.
Terrific.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.